Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alexei, and today I have a special guest, Huart of Produce Like a Pro. I have been a student of Produce Like a Pro Academy for 2 years, and I have learned so much and still learn a lot from Warren. Thank you so much, Warren, for all of your wonderful tutorials, for all of your wonderful courses, and for all the amazing knowledge you are sharing with all the students of Produce Like a Pro Academy. I super appreciate your friendship and your support. So let's start our interview. So my first question is, what is your music background?
Oh, that's a huge question. How did that could be our whole interview, Alexei? How did I become this? I think becoming a producer and an engineer and a songwriter and all of that stuff is, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be Brian May. I didn't know why. I just knew when I listened to Queen and I listened to A Night at the Opera in particular, and ELO and all of these great records. When I listened to them as a little kid, and we're talking like 7, 8, 9 years old, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I want to be involved in this. And then I think when I got to like 14, 15, 16, I didn't pick up guitar till I was 15. So I started playing guitar at 15. And I think that then I wanted to be in a band. I knew that, that was it. I wanted to be in a band. So, and then by the time I was 16, I was making a living playing music, playing in clubs and stuff. But for me, I think for me, it was a natural transition after being in bands and having record deals and touring, was to, go full-time into recording. However, the whole time I was in bands, I was already recording. I was already, a quote-unquote recording engineer from the moment I started playing, because all I wanted to do was record the ideas that I had. I would lay down like really basic rhythm guitar parts and then write guitar leads over them and then figure out harmonies and all this stuff. Very naively, don't get me wrong. I wasn't a genius or anything like that. I was just, doing what I could. So right from the get-go, with 2 tape decks, with my parents' Philips tape deck and my dad's stereo, old Sony stereo, I was taking cassettes and recording and overdubbing with a lot of hiss and blowing up my parents' speakers. I blew up my dad's speakers in the stereo by plugging the guitar into the record, into the mic input on the home stereo, putting it into record and playing through it with those incredibly dynamic, uncompressed signal of an electric guitar going straight into it. I blew up the speakers, rather than just playing, programmed music that hi-fi speakers are usually used to. It wasn't quite the same as plugging your guitar into it. Wasn't a Celestian speaker used to an overly dynamic signal. Anyway, to cut a long story short, yes, that was sort of my... that's the sort of long, short version of how I became a recording engineer.
My second question is, why you decided to create Produce Like a Pro Academy?
I mean, I think the answer's in the question. That's a great question. I mean, I essentially wanted, I've got a really nice accent because I grew up in a really beautiful part of the world. I grew up in a lovely village in Hampshire, and I'm very, very blessed. However, my father was a painter, a sculptor, and we didn't really have any money, but I went to great schools in a great part of the world. And so I had all the accoutrements of that, but I didn't have any of the money associated with, living in these beautiful parts of the world. So why am I waffling on about that? I'm waffling on about that because I had to sort of push against a lot of things. And I realized with Produce Like a Pro that I had an opportunity, both with the YouTube channel and in particular with the Academy, to just help people regardless of their income brackets. And also get rid of a lot of the kind of elitist kind of BS that's out there about, how, X, Y, or Z person is the world's greatest mixer. And you and I know from the Academy, there's times on when we do Feedback Fridays where you just listen to tracks and you're like, this mix is amazing. And who did it? And we're like, we've never heard of them. You know, we know that there's incredibly talented people out there. And because the technology now is available to everybody from every different walk of life, every different country, every different ethnicity, every different gender, it doesn't matter. We all have access to it. It's not just the same half a dozen guys that it used to be. Now it's, you know, it's available to everyone. And to me, that's a big deal. And, you know, I took a long time coming up against that kind of stuff to make a living. And it's wonderful to be able to give back and provide a service that helps people, you know, become successful in their chosen field. And that's a really huge deal. So I think your question was pretty spot on because it highlights all of those things.
My next question is, you are promoting lately a lot of talented metal sound producers who made their courses for Pro Mix Academy. But if you would be given an offer to mix metal music, would you accept the offer?
I would, but it would be my version of it. I think one of the things that's going on in metal at the moment, and I know that I hear this from every person who's involved in the metal community, is that there's a sort of focus on one way of doing it. And I don't know if I would mix an extreme metal album the way that sounds like the way everybody else mixes an extreme metal album. I have a sound that I love, and I would probably twist and turn it to each song, and each song would have a different thing, as opposed to having 10 songs that have the same drum sound and the same guitar sound and everything. That's not really what I do. I'd much rather open up and do something unique on each song. And it's difficult because I get artists, like rock artists, come to me, especially heavy rock artists, heavy metal artists, saying that they don't want that. They say, I don't want to sound like everybody else. And then you do something that doesn't sound like everybody else. And then they say, well, I need it to sound a bit more like everybody else. So it's kind of a catch-22. I like crossover between all genres. I like crossover in everything. You know, I like hearing all kinds of cultures, musical styles, genres, whatever the word you want to say. I love it when it blends together. Because rock, we wouldn't have heavy rock or anything without blues. And without blues, you know what I mean? So I like a bit more groove, a bit more feel, a bit more swing to it, a bit more funk to it. Whatever the word is, I like it. When things are, you know, perfectly gridded and played within a sample of perfection, it's not what I love. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate it, because I do, but it's not something that I necessarily want to do myself. I don't necessarily want to spend my day going making everything sound like a machine. And that's increasingly how those records are made. Even the live drummers aren't playing in the studio anymore, they're just programming the drums. And for that genre, that's okay. That's just not necessarily me. I'd rather have the drummer in the room and have him play and get an amazing performance from him or her, and then maybe correct a couple of things, as opposed to, making it absolutely sample accurately, perfectly gridded, So, yes is the answer to your question, but would I be able to do something, or would I want to do something that everybody else considers to be competitive? Maybe not. That's probably the only sort of downside.
My next question is, what is a definition of a professional sound engineer for you?
Oh, I think whether it comes producer, engineer or mixer, all the best ones in the world, the ones that we look up to as being the greatest of the greats, they all worked in multiple genres. But I do think, going back to your second question, I think for modern metal, people rely on, Slate Trigger 2, you know what I mean? They rely on that certain drum sound. And God bless Stephen for doing it, but that's what they rely on. They rely on something like ultra, standard. I don't want to say stock because that's not fair, but there's a standard that people want to meet. And I think that, we have to be aware of that, that if we want that standard to be employed, then there's going to be people that specialize in it. So it's kind of, I understand your question. I believe in diversity in everything, like I said earlier, The blues, jazz, folk music, classical music, country, funk, R&B, soul. I mean, it's just like, I love it all. I love all kinds of music. And all of my favorite artists, from Robert Johnson to Jimi Hendrix to Miles Davis to the Beatles to Queen, to the Pretenders to, no matter who you ask me, whatever day it is, all of my favorite artists were able to blend all of those genres together. So that's to me still the ultimate in music, is when I put something on and I hear all different kinds of flavors, and it's beautiful. It makes me happy. But I understand your question. I mean, I think if you're in a niche and you're absolutely amazing at your genre and you're the best of the best, you can probably make a really good living being an incredible metal producer. Make a really good living being an incredible, in certain things. There's just certain genres. It's probably a very, very finite amount of people successful in it.
So my next question is, how to become the assistant of a sound engineer? What qualities and what knowledge you should have to get a job?
Easygoing, defensiveness. I have no time for it. If somebody's going to give me the 1.5 hour excuse why they didn't do something, it's just like, it's like you're rolling your eyes, looking around, like going, "Whoa, can we get on with the work?" We all make mistakes. I make mistakes frequently. Eric has been occasionally known for making the odd mistake when he arrives on time early enough to do that. Chink. But you understand what I mean. All joking aside, it's like, make a mistake, own it, move on, fix it, great. If it's just like, hey, if you're trying, there's nothing worse when you're trying to run any kind of business, let alone music, when you have an hour-long conversation about something because somebody's really just trying to prove that they didn't do something wrong. It's like, I'll have forgotten that something went wrong. The only reason why I'm going to remember is if somebody just keeps hammering at home. It's like, can we just move on, solve the problem, and get creating great music? So that's a massive attribute. Not being defensive, owning your mistakes, knowing how to deal with problems is a big deal. If you're in the studio and something goes wrong, don't run around with a freaking flag waving, say, "Oh my God, this went wrong." It's just going to install panic in the artist, and they're not going to feel good when they're working with you, because they'll think, "Oh my God, what went wrong? Oh my God, oh my God." You have to learn how to roll with the punches, fix something, without making a big deal out of it. Its personality is a big, big, big thing. At the moment, one of my friends reached out to me with a position to work with one of the biggest producers in the world, and they're looking for somebody for that position. And they're asking me who I know and who I could recommend, and his number one attribute was, has to be a good hang. Most important, has to be somebody they can actually be around. If it's just somebody who's super negative and defensive and, chip on their shoulder, it's just not going to work. Just has to be somebody easygoing, that understands the business we're in, and that not everything's perfect and you've got to make it great. It's a huge deal. Has to be a good hang, number one attribute. You've got to have enough of a musical background and enough of a technical thing that you're not going to be starting from zero. But you only have to have a certain level of technical ability, like know your DAW really well, know your DAW well. You don't have to know the SSL. We'll teach you how to use the SSL. And if you got enough ability, and if you can play an instrument, that helps, because it shows that you're musical. All of those things are important and definitely will get you in through the door. But the 90% of the job is being easy to work with and being willing to learn and not think that you know everything. I mean, all the guys that I've worked with and girls that I've worked with that I love have all been very easygoing and very willing to learn, and aren't spending their whole time telling me that they could have done it better.
My next question is, how do you organize your work with famous musicians? Is there a difference between working with famous musicians and not famous musicians?
No, there's no difference at all. And I think if you start overly trying to make everything feel perfect, for one person and not another, just because you think that they're more famous or whatever, then you're doomed for failure. And yeah, it's like I was thinking about this morning. I opened up YouTube, and there was some like serious trolling going on from somebody, and I just remember thinking to myself, this poor person is having a really hard time in life. You could see all of these emotional things coming out that were completely unconnected with what they were talking about. And it was disheartening, because I felt like this is really sad that this person is so angry about something which has got nothing to do with what's going on in the conversation. And it's like I feel like I want to be there to help as much as I can. But when you're in a work situation, you don't have time for that. You don't have time for working around people's different emotional states. And it doesn't matter if you're... So you don't want that in the employees and the people you're working with. And if you got it in the artist, it doesn't matter if they're famous or up and coming. You have to treat them the same way. You have to know how to treat people equally. And you have to know how to navigate everybody's foibles. Everybody has emotional issues, about one thing. The most perfect person in the world, I have no idea who that is. We all have our things that we have to deal with, and they can be just as evident in an up-and-comer as they can in a successful artist. I will say, though, successful artists with long-term careers, I just interviewed my friend Susanna Hoffs. The video went up a couple of days ago, and depending on when you put your video up, and everybody's like, wow, she's so easygoing and so smart and so intelligent and all of these things. And it's like, that's no accident that she's really successful, because she gets on really well with people, and she's able to sit in a room with a couple of people and write a song like Eternal Flame, which is one of the biggest songs of all time. And she was able to do that because she brought in a level of talent, but also was able to navigate other people's ideas, and people were able to navigate her ideas. And that's how you get great songs. And that's how you get great recordings, is the ability to get the best out of each other. And it's a skill that we need. I always make this joke, you've heard me say it 100 times before inside the Academy: you can throw a stone into a crowd of people and hit a great guitar player. I mean, go onto YouTube, how many amazing guitar players out there? And the difference between the ones that are successful and the ones that aren't has got very little to do with their ability to play. It's got to do with how well they play with others, not how well they play their instrument.
And my final question is, after having such a big experience working as a sound producer, is there anything you want to learn to apply in your production?
Oh, I feel like I'm learning every day. I mean, I'd love to be, I think I'm just like everybody else. I want to have that opportunity where I can work with amazing artists and have time on my hands to record great records. It's just we're in a different world, with the budgets being significantly smaller and the rewards of great albums being significantly smaller. It means that we don't quite have the time that we used to. But it's okay, because the technology has made it easier. So now it's about clear focus and understanding. So I just think, the longer we do this, it's more about like, how can we streamline our process so we have a clear vision of what we want, and then we have the focus to be able to create that. And that's the biggest thing for me. It's like, that's what I'm always learning.
Thank you so much, Warren, for such a great interview.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video will be useful for you. Please check out Produce Like a Pro YouTube channel, Produce Like a Pro Academy, and see you next time.